Jim, if I can just respond very quickly. First of all, every study has shown that Medicare has lower administrative costs than private insurance does, which is why seniors are generally pretty happy with it. And private insurers have to make a profit. Nothing wrong with that. That's what they do. And so you've got higher administrative costs plus profit on top of that. And if you are going to save any money through what Governor Romney is proposing, what has to happen is that the money has to come from somewhere. And when you move to a voucher system, you are putting seniors at the mercy of those insurance companies. And over time, if traditional Medicare has decayed or fallen apart, then they're stuck. And this is the reason why AARP has said that your plan would weaken Medicare substantially, and that's why they were supportive of the approach that we took. One last point I want to make. We do have to lower the cost of health care, not just in Medicare and Medicaid.
Talk about that in a minute.
But overall.
Oh, okay.
And so
that's a big topic. Can we stay at Medicare?
I want to get to it, but all I want to do is very quickly
let's get back to
before we leave the
Medicare.
economy.
Let's get back to Medicare. The president said that the government can provide the service at lower cost and without a profit.
All right.
If that's the case, then it will always be the best product that people can purchase. But my experience is the private sector typically is able to provide a better product at a lower cost.
Can the two of you agree that the voters have a choice, a clear choice between the two of you on Medicare?
Absolutely.
All right. So to finish quickly, briefly on the economy, what is your view about the level of federal regulation of the economy right now? Is there too much? And in your case, Mr. President, should there be more? Beginning with you. This is not a new 2-minute segment. Just start, and we'll go for a few minutes, and then we're going to go to health care, okay?
Regulation is essential. You can't have a free market work if you don't have regulation. As a business person, I had to have I need to know the regulations. I needed them there. You couldn't have people opening up banks in their garage and making loans. I mean, you have to have regulations so that you can have an economy work. Every free economy has good regulation. At the same time, regulation can become excessive.
Is it excessive now, do you think?
In some places, yes.
Like
in other
where?
places, no. It can become out of date. And what's happened with some of the legislation that's been passed during the president's term, you've seen regulation become excessive, and it's hurt the economy. Let me give you an example. Dodd-Frank was passed, and it includes within it a number of provisions that I think have some unintended consequences that are harmful to the economy. One is it designates a number of banks as too big to fail, and they're effectively guaranteed by the federal government. This is the biggest kiss that's been given to New York banks I've ever seen. This is an enormous boon for them. There have been 122 community and small banks have closed since Dodd-Frank. So there's one example. Here's another. In Dodd-Frank, it says—
You want to repeal Dodd-Frank?
Well, I would repeal that and replace it. We're not going to get rid of all regulation. You have to have regulation. Okay. And there's some parts of Dodd-Frank that make all the sense in the world. You need transparency. You need to have leverage limits for institutions. Well,
here's a specific.
But let's mention the other one. Let's talk the other big one.
No, let's not. Okay. Let's let him respond. Let's let him respond to this specific on Dodd-Frank and what the governor just said.
Well, I think this is a great example. The reason we have been in such an enormous economic crisis was prompted by reckless behavior across the board. Now, it wasn't just on Wall Street. You had loan officers that were given loans and mortgages that really shouldn't have been given because the folks didn't qualify. You had people who were borrowing money to buy a house that they couldn't afford. You had credit agencies that were stamping these as A1 great investments when they weren't. But you also had banks making money hand over fist, churning out products that the bankers themselves didn't even understand in order to make big profits, but knowing that it made the entire system vulnerable. So what did we do? We stepped in and had the toughest reforms on Wall Street since the 1930s. We said, you've got banks, you've got to raise your capital requirements. You can't engage in some of this risky behavior that is putting Main Street at risk. We're going to make sure that you've got to have a living will so we can know how you're going to wind things down if you make a bad bet, so we don't have other taxpayer bailouts. In the meantime, by the way, we also made sure that all the help that we provided those banks was paid back every single dime with interest. Now, Governor Romney has said he wants to repeal Dodd-Frank. And, I appreciate, and it appears we've got some agreement that a marketplace to work has to have some regulation. But in the past, Governor Romney has said he just wants to repeal Dodd-Frank, roll it back. And so the question is, does anybody out there think that the big problem we had is that there was too much oversight and regulation of Wall Street? Because if you do, then Governor Romney is your candidate. But that's not what I believe.
That's just not the facts. Look, we have to have regulation on Wall Street. Yeah. That's why I'd have regulation. But I wouldn't designate 5 banks as too big to fail and give them a blank check. That's one of the unintended consequences of Dodd-Frank. It wasn't thought through properly. We need to get rid of that provision because it's killing regional and small banks. They're getting hurt. Let me mention another regulation in Dodd-Frank. You say we were giving mortgages to people who weren't qualified. That's exactly right. It's one of the reasons for the great financial calamity we had. And so Dodd-Frank correctly says we need to have qualified mortgages, and if you give a mortgage that's not qualified, there are big penalties. Except they didn't ever go on to define what a qualified mortgage was. It's been 2 years. We don't know what a qualified mortgage is yet. So banks are reluctant to make loans, mortgages. Try and get a mortgage these days. It's hurt the housing market because Dodd-Frank didn't anticipate putting in place the kinds of regulations you have to have. It's not that Dodd-Frank always was wrong with too much regulation. Sometimes they didn't come out with the clear regulation. I will make sure we don't hurt the functioning of our marketplace and our businesses because I want to bring back housing and get good jobs.
All right, I think we have another clear difference between the two of you. Now let's move to health care, where I know there is a clear difference. And that has to do with the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and it's a new segment, and that means 2 minutes each. And you go first, Governor Romney. You want it repealed. You want the Affordable Care Act repealed. Why?
I sure do. Well, in part, it comes again from my experience. I was in New Hampshire. A woman came to me and she said, "Look, I can't afford insurance for myself or my son." I met a couple in Appleton, Wisconsin, and they said, "We're thinking of dropping our insurance. We can't afford it." And the number of small businesses I've gone to that are saying they're dropping insurance because they can't afford it, the cost of health care is just prohibitive, and we've got to deal with cost. And unfortunately, when you look at Obamacare, the Congressional Budget Office has said it will cost $2,500 a year more than traditional insurance. So it's adding to cost. And as a matter of fact, when the president ran for office, he said that by this year he would have brought down the cost of insurance for each family by $2,500 a family. Instead, it's gone up by that amount. So it's expensive. Expensive things hurt families. So that's one reason I don't want it. Second reason, it cuts $716 billion from Medicare to pay for it. I want to put that money back in Medicare for our seniors. Number 3, it puts in place an unelected board that's going to tell people ultimately what kind of treatments they can have. I don't like that idea. Fourth, there was a survey done of small businesses across the country. It said, what's been the effect of Obamacare on your hiring plans? And 3/4 of them said it makes us less likely to hire people. I just don't know how the president could have come into office facing 23 million people out of work, rising unemployment, an economic crisis at the kitchen table, and spent his energy and passion for 2 years fighting for Obamacare instead of fighting for jobs for the American people. It has killed jobs. And the best course for health care is to do what we did in my state, craft a plan at the state level that fits the needs of the state. And then let's focus on getting the cost down for people rather than raising it with the $2,500 additional premium.
Mr. President, the argument against repeal.
Well, 4 years ago when I was running for office, I was traveling around and having those same conversations that Governor Romney talks about. And it wasn't just that small businesses were seeing costs skyrocket and they couldn't get affordable coverage even if they wanted to provide it to their employees. It wasn't just that this was the biggest driver of our federal deficit, our overall health care costs, but it was families who were worried about going bankrupt if they got sick. Millions of families all across the country. If they had a pre-existing condition, they might not be able to get coverage at all. If they did have coverage, insurance companies might impose an arbitrary limit. And so as a consequence, they're paying their premiums. Somebody gets really sick. Lo and behold, they don't have enough money to pay the bills because the insurance companies say that they've hit the limit. So we did work on this alongside working on jobs, because this is part of making sure that middle-class families are secure in this country. And let me tell you exactly what Obamacare did. Number one, if you've got health insurance, it doesn't mean a government takeover. You keep your own insurance, you keep your own doctor, but it does say insurance companies can't jerk you around. They can't impose arbitrary lifetime limits. They have to let you keep your kid on their your insurance plan until you're 26 years old. And it also says that you're going to have to get rebates if insurance companies are spending more on administrative costs and profits than they are on actual care. Number two, if you don't have health insurance, we're essentially setting up a group plan that allows you to benefit from group rates that are typically 18% lower than if you're out there trying to get insurance on the individual market. Now, the last point I'd make before
2 minutes is up, sir.
No, I think I had 5 seconds before you interrupted me. Was the irony is that we've seen this model work really well in Massachusetts, because Governor Romney did a good thing working with Democrats in the state to set up what is essentially the identical model. And as a consequence, people are covered there. It hasn't destroyed jobs. And as a consequence, we now have a system in which we have the opportunity to start bringing down costs, as opposed to just leaving millions of people out in the cold.
Your 5 seconds went away a long time ago.
All
right, Governor, tell the president directly why you think what he just said is wrong about Obama.
Well, I did with my first statement, but I'll go on.
Please elaborate.
I'll elaborate. Exactly right. First of all, I like the way we did it in Massachusetts. I like the fact that in my state we had Republicans and Democrats come together and work together. What you did instead was to push through a plan without a single Republican vote. As a matter of fact, when Massachusetts did something quite extraordinary, elected a Republican senator to stop Obamacare, you pushed it through anyway. So entirely on a partisan basis, instead of bringing America together and having a discussion on this important topic, you pushed through something that you and Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid thought was the best answer and drove it through. What we did in a legislature, 87% Democrat, we worked together. 200 legislators in my legislature, only 2 voted against the plan by the time we were finished. What were some differences? We didn't raise taxes. You've raised them by $1 trillion under Obamacare. We didn't cut Medicare. Of course, we don't have Medicare, but we didn't cut Medicare by $716 billion. We didn't put in place a board that can tell people ultimately what treatments they're going to receive. We didn't also do something that I think a number of people across this country recognize, which is put people in a position where they're going to lose the insurance they had and they wanted. Right now, the CBO says up to 20 million people will lose their insurance as Obamacare goes into effect next year. And likewise, a study by McKinsey and Company of American businesses said 30% of them are anticipating dropping people from coverage. So for those reasons, for the tax, for Medicare, for this board, and for people losing their insurance, this is why the American people don't want Medicare, don't want Obamacare. It's why Republicans said, do not do this. And the Republicans had the plan. They put a plan out. They put out a plan, a bipartisan plan. It was swept aside. I think something this big, this important, has to be done on a bipartisan basis. And we have to have a president who can reach across the aisle and fashion important legislation with the input from both parties.
Governor Romney said this has to be done on a bipartisan basis. This was a bipartisan idea. In fact, it was a Republican idea. And Governor Romney, at the beginning of this debate, wrote and said, what we did in Massachusetts could be a model for the nation. And I agree that the Democratic legislators in Massachusetts might have given some advice to Republicans in Congress about how to cooperate. But the fact of the matter is, we used the same advisors, and they say it's the same plan. When Governor Romney talks about this board, for example, unelected board that we've created, what this is a group of healthcare experts, doctors, et cetera, to figure out how can we reduce the cost of care in the system overall. Because there are two ways of dealing with our healthcare crisis. One is to simply leave a whole bunch of people uninsured and let them fend for themselves, to let businesses figure out how long they can continue to pay premiums until finally they just give up and their workers are no longer getting insured. And that's been the trend line. Or alternatively, we can figure out how do we make the cost of care more effective. And there are ways of doing it. So at Cleveland Clinic, one of the best healthcare systems in the world, they actually provide great care cheaper than average. And the reason they do is because they do some smart things. They say, if a patient's coming in, let's get all the doctors together at once, do one test instead of having the patient run around with 10 tests. Let's make sure that we're providing preventive care, so we're catching the onset of something like diabetes. Let's pay providers on the basis of performance as opposed to on the basis of how many procedures they've engaged in. Now, so what this board does is basically identifies best practices and says, let's use the purchasing power of Medicare and Medicaid to help to institutionalize all these good things that we do. And the fact of the matter is that when Obamacare is fully implemented, we're going to be in a position to show that costs are going down. And over the last 2 years, healthcare premiums have gone up. It's true, but they've gone up slower than any time in the last 50 years. So we're already beginning to see progress. In the meantime, folks out there with insurance, you're already getting a rebate. Let me make one last point. Governor Romney says we should replace it. I'm just going to repeal it, but we can replace it with something. But the problem is he hasn't described what exactly we'd replace it with, other than saying we're going to leave it to the states. But the fact of the matter is that some of the prescriptions that he's offered, like letting you buy insurance across state lines, there's no indication that that somehow is going to help somebody who's got a pre-existing condition be able to finally buy insurance. In fact, it's estimated that by repealing Obamacare, you're looking at 50 million people losing health insurance at a time when it's vitally important.
Let's let the governor explain what you would do if Obamacare is repealed. How would you replace it?
Actually, it's a lengthy description, but number one, pre-existing conditions are covered under my plan. Number two, young people are able to stay on their family plan. That's already offered in the private marketplace. You don't have to have the government mandate that for that to occur. But let's come back to something the President and I agree on, which is the key task we have in healthcare is to get the cost down so it's more affordable for families. And then he has as a model for doing that a board of people at the government, an unelected board, appointed board, who are going to decide what kind of treatment you ought to have. In my opinion, the government is not effective in bringing down the cost of almost anything. As a matter of fact, free people and free enterprises trying to find ways to do things better are able to be more effective in bringing down the cost than the government will ever be. Your example of the Cleveland Clinic is my case in point, along with several others I could describe. This is the private market. These are enterprises competing with each other, learning how to do better and better jobs. I used to consult to to hospitals and to healthcare providers. I was astonished at the creativity and innovation that exists in the American people. In order to bring the cost of healthcare down, we don't need to have a board of 15 people telling us what kinds of treatments we should have. We instead need to put insurance plans, providers, hospitals, doctors on target such that they have an incentive, as you say, performance pay for doing an excellent job for keeping costs down, and that's happening. Intermountain Healthcare does it superbly well. Mayo Clinic is doing it superbly well. Cleveland Clinic, others. But the right answer is not to have the federal government take over healthcare and start mandating to the providers across America, telling a patient and a doctor what kind of treatment they can have. That's the wrong way to go. The private market and individual responsibility always work best.
Let me just point out, first of all, this board that we're talking about can't make decisions about what treatments are given. That's explicitly prohibited in the law. But let's go back to what Governor Romney indicated, that under his plan, he would be able to cover people with pre-existing conditions. Well, actually, Governor, that isn't what your plan does. What your plan does is to duplicate what's already the law, which says, if you are out of health insurance for 3 months, then you can end up getting continuous coverage, and an insurance company can't deny you if it's been under 90 days. But that's already the law, and that doesn't help the millions of people out there with pre-existing conditions. There's a reason why Governor Romney set up the plan that he did in Massachusetts. It wasn't a government takeover of health care. It was the largest expansion of private insurance. But what it does say is that insurers, you've got to take everybody. Now, that also means that you've got more customers. But when Governor Romney says that he'll replace it with something, but can't detail how it will be, in fact, replaced, and the reason he set up the system he did in Massachusetts was because there isn't a better way of dealing with the pre-existing conditions problem. It just reminds me of, he says that he's going to close deductions and loopholes for his tax plan. That's how it's going to be paid for, but we don't know the details. He says that he's going to replace Dodd-Frank, Wall Street reform, but we don't know exactly which ones. He won't tell us. He now says he's going to replace Obamacare and assure that all the good things that are in it are going to be in there, and you don't have to worry. And at some point, I think the American people have to ask themselves, is the reason that Governor Romney is keeping all these plans to replace secret because they're too good? Is it because that somehow middle-class families are going to benefit too much from them? No, the reason is because when we reform Wall Street, when we tackle the problem of pre-existing conditions, then these are tough problems, and we've got to make choices. And the choices we've made have been ones that ultimately are benefiting middle-class families all across the country.
We're going to move to a
no, I have to respond to that, which is my experience as a governor. Is if I come in and lay down a piece of legislation and say it's my way or the highway, I don't get a lot done. What I do is the same way that Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan worked together some years ago. When Ronald Reagan ran for office, he laid out the principles that he was going to foster. He said he was going to lower tax rates. He said he was going to broaden the base. You've said the same thing. You're going to simplify the tax code, broaden the base. Those are my principles. I want to bring down the tax burden on middle-income families. And I'm going to work together with Congress to say, okay, what are the various ways we could bring down deductions, for instance? One way, for instance, would be to have a single number. Make up a number, $25,000, $50,000. Anybody can have deductions up to that amount. And then that number disappears for high-income people. That's one way one could do it. One could follow Bowles-Simpson as a model and take deduction by deduction and make differences that way. There are alternatives to accomplish the objective I have, which is to bring down rates, broaden the base, simplify the code, and create incentives for growth. And with regards to health care, you had remarkable details with regards to my pre-existing condition plan. You obviously have studied up on my plan. In fact, I do have a plan that deals with people with pre-existing conditions. That's part of my health care plan. And what we did in Massachusetts is a model for the nation, state by state. And I said that at that time. The federal government taking over health care for the entire nation and whisking aside the 10th Amendment, which gives states the rights for these kinds of things, is not the course for America to have a stronger, more vibrant economy.
That is a terrific segue to our next segment, and is the role of government. And let's see, role of government, and it is, you are first on this, Mr. President, and the question is this: do you believe, both of you, but you had the first 2 minutes on this, Mr. President, do you believe there's a fundamental difference between the two of you as to how you view the mission of the federal government?
Well, I definitely think there are differences. The first role of the federal government is to keep the American people safe. That's its most basic function. And as Commander-in-Chief, that is something that I have worked on and thought about every single day that I've been in the Oval Office. But I also believe that government has the capacity, the federal government has the capacity to help open up opportunity and create ladders of opportunity and to create frameworks where the American people can succeed. Look, the genius of America is the free enterprise system and freedom, and the fact that people can go out there and start a business, work on an idea, make their own decisions. But as Abraham Lincoln understood, there are also some things we do better together. So in the middle of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln said, let's help to finance the Transcontinental Railroad. Let's start the National Academy of Sciences. Let's start land-grant colleges, because we want to give these gateways of opportunity for all Americans, because if all Americans are getting opportunity, we're all going to be better off. That doesn't restrict people's freedom, that enhances it. And so what I've tried to do as president is to apply those same principles. When it comes to education, what I've said is we've got to reform schools that are not working. We used something called race to the top. It wasn't a top-down approach, Governor. What we've said is to states, we'll give you more money if you initiate reforms. And as a consequence, you had 46 states around the country who have made a real difference. But what I've also said is let's hire another 100,000 math and science teachers to make sure we maintain our technological lead and our people are skilled and able to succeed. And hard-pressed states right now can't all do that. In fact, we've seen layoffs of hundreds of thousands of teachers over the last several years, and Governor Romney doesn't think we need more teachers. I do, because I think that that is the kind of investment where the federal government can help. It can't do it all, but it can make a difference. And as a consequence, we'll have a better trained workforce, and that will create jobs because companies want to locate in places where we've got a skilled workforce.
2 minutes, Governor, on the role of government. Your view.
Well, first, I love great schools. Massachusetts, our schools are ranked #1 of all 50 states. And the key to great schools, great teachers. So I reject the idea that I don't believe in great teachers or more teachers. Every school district, every state should make that decision on their own. The role of government. Look behind us. The Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. The role of government is to promote and protect the principles of those documents. First, life and liberty. We have a responsibility to protect the lives and liberties of our people, and that means a military second to none. I do not believe in cutting our military. I believe in maintaining the strength of America's military. Second, in that line that says we are endowed by our Creator with our rights, I believe we must maintain our commitment to religious tolerance and freedom in this country. That statement also says that we are endowed by our Creator with the right to pursue happiness as we choose. I interpret that as, one, making sure that those people who are less fortunate and can't care for themselves are cared by one another. We're a nation that believes that we're all children of the same God, and we care for those that have difficulties, those that are elderly and have problems and challenges, those that are disabled. We care for them, and we look for discovery and innovation, all these things desired out of the American heart to provide the pursuit of happiness for our citizens. But we also believe in maintaining for individuals the right to pursue their dreams and not to have the government substitute itself for the rights of free individuals. And what we're seeing right now is, in my view, a trickle-down government approach, which has government thinking it can do a better job than free people pursuing their dreams, and it's not working. And the proof of that is 23 million people out of work. The proof of that is 1 out of 6 people in poverty. The proof of that is we've gone from 32 million on food stamps to 47 million on food stamps. The proof of that is that 50% of college graduates this year can't find work. We know that the path we're taking is not working. It's time for a new path.
All right, let's go through some specifics in terms of how each of you views the role of government. Education. Does the federal government have a responsibility to improve the quality of public education in America?
Well, the primary responsibility for education is of course, at the state and local level. But the federal government also can play a very important role. And I agree with Secretary Arne Duncan. It's some ideas he's put forward on race to the top, not all of them, but some of them I agree with, and congratulate him for pursuing that. The federal government can get local and state schools to do a better job. My own view, by the way, is I've added to that. I happen to believe I want the kids that are getting federal dollars from IDEA or Title I. These are disabled kids or poor kids or lower income kids, rather. I want them to be able to go to the school of their choice. So all federal funds, instead of going to the state or to the school district, I'd have go, if you will, follow the child and let the parent and the child decide where to send their student.
How do you see the federal government's responsibility to, as I say, to improve the quality of public education in this country?
Well, as I've indicated, I think that it has a significant role to play. Through our Race to the Top program, we've worked with Republican and Democratic governors to initiate major reforms, and they're having an impact right now.
Do you think you have a difference with your views and those of Governor Romney about education? And
this is where budgets matter, because budgets reflect choices. So when Governor Romney indicates that he wants to cut taxes and potentially benefit folks like me and him, and to pay for it, we're having to initiate significant cuts in federal support for education. That makes a difference. His running mate, Congressman Ryan, put forward a budget that reflects many of the principles that Governor Romney's talked about. And it wasn't very detailed. This seems to be a trend, but what it did do is to, if you extrapolated how much money we're talking about, you'd look at cutting the education budget by up to 20%. When it comes to community colleges, we are seeing great work done out there all over the country, because we have the opportunity to train people for jobs that exist right now. And one of the things I suspect Governor Romney and I probably agree on is getting businesses to work with community colleges so that they're setting up their training programs.
Do you agree, Governor?
Let me just finish the point.
It's by what
I suspect it'll be a small
going very well
agreement.
in my state, by the way. Yeah.
Where they're partnering so that they're designing training programs, and people who are going through them know that there's a job waiting for them if they complete.
Okay.
That makes a big difference, but that requires some federal support. Let me just say one final example. When it comes to making college affordable, whether it's 2-year or 4-year, one of the things that I did as president was we were sending $60 billion to banks and lenders as middlemen for the student loan program, even though the loans were guaranteed. So there was no risk for the banks or the lenders, but they were taking billions out of the system. And we said, why not cut out the middleman? And as a consequence, what we've been able to do is to provide millions more students assistance, lower or keep low interest rates on student loans. And this is an example of where our priorities make a difference. Governor Romney, I genuinely believe, cares about education. But when he tells a student that you should borrow money from your parents to go to college, that indicates the degree to which there may not be as much of a focus on the fact that folks like myself, folks like Michelle, kids who attend University of Denver, just don't have that option. And for us to be able to make sure that they've got that opportunity and they can walk through that door, that is vitally important, not just to those kids. It's how we're going to grow this economy over the long term.
We're running out of time, gentlemen. So you have a chance. Respond to that. Yes, sir, Governor.
Mr. President, you're entitled as a president of your own airplane and to your own house, but not to your own facts. All right, I'm not going to cut education funding. I don't have any plan to cut education funding and grants that go to people going to college. I'm planning on continuing to grow, so I'm not planning on making changes there. But you make a very good point, which is that the place you put your money makes a pretty clear indication of where your heart is. You put $90 billion into green jobs. And I'm all in favor of green energy. $90 billion. That would have hired 2 million teachers. $90 billion. And these businesses, many of them have gone out of business. I think about half of them, of the ones that have been invested in, have gone out of business. A number of them happen to be owned by people who are contributors to your campaigns. Look, the right course for America's government, we're talking about the role of government, is not to become the economic player, picking winners and losers, telling people what kind of health treatment they can receive, taking over the health care system that has existed in this country for a long, long time and has produced the best health records in the world. The right answer for government is to say, how do we make the private sector become more efficient and more effective? How do we get schools to be more competitive? Let's grade them. I propose we grade our schools so parents know which schools are succeeding and failing, so they can take their child to a school that's being more successful. I don't want to cut our commitment to education. I wanted to make it more effective and efficient. And by the way, I've had that experience. I don't just talk about it. I've been there. Massachusetts schools are ranked #1 in the nation. This is not because I didn't have commitment to education. It's because I care about education for all of our kids.
All right, gentlemen, look, excuse me one sec. Excuse me, sir. We barely have 3 minutes left. I'm not going to grade the two of you and say your answers have been too long, or I've done a poor job.
You've done a great job.
Oh, well, no. But the fact is, government, the role of government and governing, we've lost a pot, in other words. So we only have three minutes left in the debate before we go to your closing statements. And so I want to ask finally here, and remember, we got 3 minutes total time here. And the question is this: many of the legislative functions of the federal government right now are in a state of paralysis as a result of partisan gridlock. If elected, in your case, if re-elected in your case, what would you do about that? Governor?
Jim, I had the great experience, it didn't seem like it at the time, of being elected in a state where my legislature was 87% Democrat. And that meant I figured out from day one I had to get along, and I had to work across the aisle to get anything done. We drove our schools to be #1 in the nation. We cut taxes 19 times.
What would you do as president?
As president, I will sit down on day one, actually the day after I get elected, I'll sit down with leaders, the Democratic leaders, as well as Republican leaders, and continue, as we did in my state. We met every Monday for a couple hours, talked about the issues and the challenges in our state in that case. We have to work on a collaborative basis, not because we're going to compromise our principle, but because there's common ground and the challenges America faces right now. Look, the reason I'm in this race is there are people that are really hurting today in this country. And we face this deficit could crush the future generations. What's happening in the Middle East? There are developments around the world that are of real concern. And Republicans and Democrats both love America, but we need to have leadership in Washington that will actually bring people together and get the job done, and could not care less if it's a Republican or a Democrat. I've done it before, I'll do it again.
Mr. President.
Well, first of all, I think Governor Romney is going to have a busy first day because he's also going to repeal Obamacare, which will not be very popular among Democrats as you're sitting down with him. Look, my philosophy has been, I will take ideas from anybody, Democrat or Republican, as long as they're advancing the cause of making middle-class families stronger and giving ladders of opportunity into the middle class. That's how we cut taxes for middle-class families and small businesses. That's how we cut $1 trillion of spending that wasn't advancing that cause. That's how we signed 3 trade deals into law that are helping us to double our exports and sell more American products around the world. That's how we repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That's how we ended the war in Iraq, as I promised, and that's how we're going to wind down the war in Afghanistan. That's how we went after al-Qaeda and bin Laden. So we've seen progress even under Republican control of the House of Representatives. But ultimately, part of being principled, part of being a leader is, A, being able to describe exactly what it is that you intend to do, not just saying, I'll sit down, but you have to have a plan. Number 2, what's important is occasionally you've got to say no to folks both in your own party and in the other party. And yes, have we had some fights between me and the Republicans when they fought back against us reining in the excesses of Wall Street? Absolutely, because that was a fight that needed to be had. When we were fighting about whether or not we were going to make sure that Americans had more security with their health insurance, and they said no, yes, that was a fight that we needed to have.
All right.
And so part of leadership and governing is both saying what it is that you are for, but also being willing to say no to some things. And I've got to tell you, Governor Romney, when it comes to his own party during the course of this campaign, has not displayed that willingness to say no to some of the more extreme parts of his party.
That brings us to closing statements. There's a coin toss. Governor Romney, you won the toss, and you elected to go last, so you have a closing 2 minutes, Mr. President.
Well, Jim, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Governor Romney, because I think this was a terrific debate, and I very much appreciate it. And I want to thank the University of Denver. 4 years ago, we were going through a major crisis, and yet my faith and confidence in the American future is undiminished. And the reason is because of its people. Because the woman I met in North Carolina who decided at 55 to go back to school because she wanted to inspire her daughter and now has a job from that new training that she's gotten. Because a company in Minnesota who was willing to give up salaries and perks for their executives to make sure that they didn't lay off workers during a recession. The auto workers that you meet in Toledo or Detroit, take such pride in building the best cars in the world, not just because of a paycheck, but because it gives them that sense of pride that they're helping to build America. And so the question now is, how do we build on those strengths? And everything that I've tried to do, and everything that I'm now proposing for the next 4 years in terms of improving our education system, or developing American energy, or making sure that we're closing loopholes for companies that are shipping jobs overseas and focusing on small business companies that are creating jobs here in the United States, or closing our deficit in a responsible, balanced way that allows us to invest in our future. All those things are designed to make sure that the American people, their genius, their grit, their determination, is channeled, and they have an opportunity to succeed. And everybody's getting a fair shot, and everybody's getting a fair share. Everybody's doing a fair share, and everybody's playing by the same rules. You know, 4 years ago, I said that I'm not a perfect man and I wouldn't be a perfect president, and that's probably a promise that Governor Romney thinks I've kept. But I also promised that I'd fight every single day on behalf of the American people, and the middle class, and all those who are striving to get in the middle class. I've kept that promise, and if you'll vote for me, then I promise I'll fight just as hard in a second term.
Governor Romney, your 2-minute close.
Thank you, Jim. And Mr. President, thank you for tuning in this evening. This is an important election, and I'm concerned about America. I'm concerned about the direction America has been taking over the last 4 years. I know this is bigger than an election about the two of us as individuals. It's bigger than our respective parties. It's an election about the course of America. What kind of America do you want to have for yourself and for your children? And there really are two very different paths that we began speaking about this evening. And over the course of this month, we're going to have 2 more presidential debates and a vice presidential debate. We'll talk about those 2 paths, but they lead in very different directions. And it's not just looking to our words that you have to take an evidence of where they go. You can look at the record. There's no question in my mind that if the president were to be reelected, you'll continue to see a middle-class squeeze with incomes going down and prices going up. I'll get incomes up again. You'll see chronic unemployment. We've had 43 straight months with unemployment above 8%. If I'm president, I will help create 12 million new jobs in this country with rising incomes. If the president's reelected, Obamacare will be fully installed. In my view, that's going to mean a whole different way of life for people who counted on the insurance plan they had in the past. Many will lose it. You're going to see health premiums go up by some $2,500 per family. If I'm elected, we won't have Obamacare. We'll put in place the kind of principles that I've put in place in my own state and allow each state to craft their own programs to get people insured, and we'll focus on getting the cost of health care down. If the president were to be reelected, you're going to see a $716 billion cut to Medicare. You'll have 4 million people who will lose Medicare Advantage. You'll have hospitals and providers that will no longer accept Medicare patients. I'll restore that $716 billion to Medicare. And finally, military. The president's reelected, you'll see dramatic cuts to our military. The Secretary of Defense has said these would be even devastating. I will not cut our commitment to our military. I will keep America strong and get America's middle class working again. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Mr. President. The next debate will be the vice presidential event on Thursday, October 11th at Center College in Danville, Kentucky. For now, from the University of Denver, I'm Jim Lara. Thank you and good night.
The conclusion of the first presidential debate of the 2012 cycle. Candidates now embracing their wives, families coming up onto the stage. We will, no question, along with the rest of the punditocracy, engage in a robust discussion of the 2-word question, who won? But let me say, before we dive into that question, that this was a remarkably substantive, some might say wonky, and cordial debate.
Yep.
On the whole, between 2 remarkably accomplished men.
There's no doubt about that. I just want to note here, we're looking at the family of Mitt Romney here. His 4 sons with him right now. We have some grandkids in there, and of course his wife. And I think you're exactly right. This was very substantive. It was very civil. It was very cordial. But I think for President Obama, it has to be, and his supporters, very disappointing. I mean, I know that just watching my Twitter stream, there are a lot of Republicans now who are much more enthusiastic about their candidate than they were before they came into this. This was a Mitt Romney who was on his toes the entire debate, the president on his heels, never got a chance to really get anything in on Mitt Romney. He really, really was under fire and did not look particularly happy about even being on that stage.
Well, let me push you on that a little bit. He did launch repeated attacks against Mitt Romney's lack of specificity.
He did, but I think that came across a little bit hollow when Romney, of course, would throw out numbers and statistics, but mostly I think what President Obama didn't do as well is actually defend his own record. That's what I mean. You know, he could come out maybe a little bit on the offense, but when he was pushed on his own record, he didn't robustly defend it. Even Obamacare, which is his signature piece of legislation.
Was it a mistake for
was
it just as we watch these pictures right now, was it a mistake, for example, for the president to be the first to leave the stage there?
Well, I didn't even notice that, but yeah, he didn't. It's almost as if he was saying, you know what, been here, thanks, going to shake a couple hands. It's time to go. I got a lot of work to do, as opposed to saying, I want to bask in this moment a little bit longer. If it were up to Mitt Romney, he would spend another 90 minutes on that debate stage. He was very happy to be there, very engaged. I'm sure he is actually sad that it's over.
Let me just reintroduce ourselves. I'm Dan Harris from ABC News, alongside Amy Walter, who's the head of our political unit here at ABC News. We are live streaming on 4 different platforms tonight: abcnews.com, Yahoo News, YouTube Election Hub, and also on ABC News apps. And we're glad you can join us. We've got an hour-long post-game debate. We've got a post-game show that we're going to talk about right now. And I guess the question, you basically come out and said that you think that Obama did poorly tonight. Did he do poorly enough that it moves the needle on this race?
Well, that's really the question we're going to find out in 3 days, because I think the fact that those of us in the punditocracy are going to talk about this, Saturday Night Live and others are going to talk about this, and it's going to come across as a debate that Obama really was not as engaged in. He seemed reticent. He seemed, as one person wrote on my Twitter stream, like a guy who needed a little bit of coffee. He was not only was he not aggressive in answering the attacks, but he never really effectively went after Mitt Romney. So I think that most folks watching this, who are the professional class, are going to drive the debate on this, and are going to drive the messaging on this. And the fact that they're going to determine this was clearly a win by Mitt Romney is going to affect the way that people who didn't even watch the debate are going to interpret it.
Now, I saw you write something down on these sheets of paper that we have in front of us as the debate was continuing. You wrote, no 47%.
Not mentioned once.
Obama did not mention it.
Not once.
Huge mistake?
I don't think it was a huge mistake. I think, in fact, what would have been better for President Obama, again, is to go in to defend and really tout his accomplishments as president. He's asking for a second term. You have to feel emboldened by what you've done in your first term, and that didn't come across as well. I think the 47% could come across in a debate like this, which, as you pointed out, was very civil and very cordial, as maybe a cheap shot. It's a thing that works really well in campaign ads. Doesn't work quite as well, as we talked about, when you have to look that person in the eye, stand this close to them, and say, you don't care about 47% of the people in this country.
Let's bring in our colleague, Rick Klein. Rick, do you agree with Amy's verdict that the president lost this debate? And do you think, if you agree with that, that it's going to change the dynamic in this race?
I think Mitt Romney had a terrific debate. I think he was sharp. I think he was specific. I think he was sustained. He came in with a specific thing that he wanted to accomplish, which was to turn this debate back to the not-so-recent history of the last 4 years. I thought there were some unlikely zingers that he was able to unfurl just by telling President Obama to his face when he talks about his plans, well, you've been president for 4 years. Just just the fact of pointing that out, I think, is the kind of thing that if you're sitting at home and thinking about whether you want to give this guy another 4 years, any plan that he puts forward, the president puts forward, has to be colored through the lens of the fact that that we've been there before and we've heard a lot of the words before. That sense of Obama's own words being his worst enemy in this campaign, we talked about it during the conventions, we've talked about it throughout this campaign. It's the central challenge of his reelection, that he is someone that ran on all these hope and expectations, and to have to defend a record that's been disappointing to so many of his own supporters, to so many Americans who are out there struggling, I think makes it difficult. I thought Mitt Romney really brought that tonight. I think from President Obama's perspective, he was able to put Mitt Romney on the defensive throughout the night, particularly defending some of his plans on taxes. I thought those were effective attacks. But I do think on balance that Mitt Romney did what he needed to do, get himself back into the ballgame right now. As to whether it tips voters, look, it's going to take some time to percolate throughout here. We're going to have other events that happen here. But if voters were looking for a reason to change their minds about Obama or stay on the fence about Obama, I think they found that in the Mitt Romney they saw tonight.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to come back to you in a second. We're going to get out to the spin room now, and Arthur Davis, the congressman, is there. And Representative Davis, I know you are speaking out on behalf of the Romney campaign. I imagine you will argue he won.
Well, I would call it the most effective performance in a debate in 20 years. I'll make a perfectly bipartisan comment. Mitt Romney had the best debate of anybody since Bill Clinton in 1992. Very effective performance. I guarantee the people in the Obama room who are watching this debate tonight had a lot of downcast faces. I can tell you the people in the Romney room were extremely excited. Mitt Romney strategically did everything that he needed to do tonight. He was aggressive, he was forceful, he wasn't intimidated by being on the stage with the greatest communicator since Ronald Reagan, and he was incredibly specific. This idea that Mitt Romney doesn't have detailed answers was completely washed away when Mitt Romney came back point after point, blow by blow, with the President of the United States of America. Mitt Romney could not have done better from a practical standpoint that he did tonight. And what an incredible time for him, given that more Americans who are making up their minds saw him in an unfiltered way tonight than at any other point in the campaign. Superb performance from Mitt Romney.
Congressman Davis, thank you very much for your time. A Democratic congressman spinning for the Republican candidate tonight. We want to point out that during the course of the event, we were running what we call a Twitter ballot, where we ask people, who do you think is winning during the course of this debate? This, of course, we should say emphatically is not scientific, but an interesting gauge. Look at the numbers. Obama, 1470. Romney, 1728. So on Twitter, they're ruling
A slight
in
edge,
favor of
yes,
Romney.
for Mitt Romney.
Again, unscientific.
Completely unscientific. But if at my Twitter feed, I'd like to say it's very bipartisan Twitter feed, and that certainly reflects what I saw on my stream as well.
Back to the spin room, we've got Jen Psaki, who is a campaign staffer on the Obama campaign. Jen, are you there? Oh,
Nope.
She's not there yet. We'll get to her in just a moment. What kind of case do you think the Obama team can make tonight? We heard from Matt Dowd earlier, who's a Republican strategist, who said, don't spin if you've got nothing to spin. What do you think the Obama team can spin?
Well, right, and yet that's her job, right? She has to go down there and make the case. So I'm very curious to hear what she's going to have to say. Look, I'm sure they're going to go back to talking points. You know, he didn't give specifics. He still hasn't addressed the fundamental questions. But at the end of the day, well, we can actually go and ask her ourselves. At the end of the day, she's going to have to figure that out. That's
Hi,
right.
Jen. Jen Psaki, it's Dan Harris and Amy Walter in New York. Can you hear us?
Hi, Dan. Hey, Amy.
Hey.
How are you? I can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Okay.
You know,
Sure.
just some of
My
the
pleasure.
some of the early sentiment we're starting to hear is that the president seemed a little, let's just say,
Maybe defensive.
and at times not so happy to be on that stage. You're the man who
Oh, I
spoke
don't
before you. Let me just finish this. The man who spoke before you, the Democratic Congressman Arthur Davis, said he thought it was a blowout
I know.
victory for Romney. So take it away. What's your response?
Well, look, I remember when Congressman Arthur Davis was working with me at the DCCC, so it's always funny to see. You know, look, the president spoke to the American people like they're adults. He laid out his plan on the economy. He talked about his plans to protect from voucherizing Medicare. He talked to the American people about what his plans are moving forward. That was our audience for tonight. That's exactly who we wanted to speak to. We know Mitt Romney probably will get some style points for his attack lines, but I don't know that gets you terribly far. He also doubled down on a lot of the failed policies and bad policies that have bedeviled his campaign. Voters in Florida and Iowa, they don't want to hear about his plans to voucherize Medicare. They don't want to hear about his plans to extend tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. And I really think that's going to be the takeaway for people who are sitting at home watching.
So, Jen, the Obama campaign's running ads all across the country talking about that 47% video, and yet we didn't hear a word of it during this debate. Never heard the president utter the 47%. Was that on purpose?
Look, well, as you said, we have ads all across the country. The president talks about this often on the campaign trail, and it really tells you something about Mitt Romney because it kind of confirms a narrative that people already think about him, that he just doesn't get it, that he doesn't understand the middle class. Tonight the president's goal wasn't to deliver a list of 5 zingers. It was to get across to the American people what his plans are, where we've been and where we're going, and we feel we did that.
Jen, I know there's no way in a million years you'll ever crack, but let me just ask you anyway. Did you not have any moments where you were looking at the screen tonight and your candidate, the president, who was looking down at his papers when he was being directly addressed by his challenger, or grimacing or looking displeased to be there, where you were tempted to throw your shoe at the screen, where you wanted him to have more energy?
Well, I can't tell you about that. I think some of the president's best moments was when he was speaking directly to the American people. When he talked about how people at home who are 54, 55 should listen to what they had to say about Social Security. When he talked about his grandma. So those were the moments where we were cheering and thinking, that's great. That's what people at home need to hear. But look, this is an important moment. It's a big audience. We're going to be back on the campaign trail tomorrow. And I think the question the Romney team needs to answer was this the game-changing performance that is going to get them a tie in Ohio and make them up in Iowa? Because at the end of the day, we're in a campaign and we have just over 30 days to go.
Jen, what do you expect now? We're going to have 3 days of talk about this before we get our first Gallup tracking poll and before people get in the field and really, see how this played out. Again, we hope that you will give us your honest answer here, but do you expect that Romney's going to make up ground? I mean, you guys, before you got on the debate, we heard a lot from folks in Chicago saying, boy, challengers always come to these debates. They do much better than the incumbent. Sure. So did he do much better than the incumbent? Do you expect he's going to make up some ground?
Well, he probably did get some style points for attack lines. We don't think that's what the American people are looking for. We know this race is going to tighten, whether it's over the next few days or next few weeks. It's kind of hard to predict. But, at the end of the day, we're going to be in Denver tomorrow holding an event. We're going to be in Wisconsin tomorrow afternoon. We're going to be in Virginia and Ohio on Friday, continuing to make the case. And that's what we're focused on.
And Jen, we of course have the vice president coming up next in debates. You want to set any, while we're at the expectation setting and looking forward,
let's go for it.
You want to tell us what you expect now that you've seen the two main candidates on the stage, what you expect from the vice presidential candidates?
Well, it's hard to watch the vice president not kind of get warm in your heart about him. He does have a penchant for giving kind of long answers, as the president does. So obviously he's spending some time preparing. I'm not involved in that particular process. But look, Paul Ryan is someone who has spent years explaining his policies and explaining his plans. So I think people should have pretty high hopes for him as well.
Another bit of expectation setting there from Jen Psaki. Jen, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And bravo at avoiding a lot of our curveballs. Well played. Appreciate that. So, one of the moments that you and I keyed in on as we watched tonight was, and we're going to play this for the audience again, is not one that I think dealt with a lot of substance, but it's the one that really lit up Twitter, and that was the Big Bird moment.
Yes.
Let's play that.
I'm sorry, Jim. I'm going to stop the subsidy to PBS. I'm going to stop other things. I like PBS. I love Big Bird. I actually like you too. But I'm not going to keep on spending money on things to borrow money from China to pay for.
We have asked John Carl, who's manning our fact check desk tonight, to fact check whether he in fact loves Big Bird. But it does.
Or
if
he actually loves Jim Lehrer.
Well,
that's the real other question.
And that's another thing we should talk about, because Jim Lehrer's been taking a pummeling on Twitter tonight. People criticizing the way he handled the debate. But if you're a comedian, and we know there are scores of them out there watching this debate, looking for material, it seems to me that was the moment you would pick.
Yeah, there's already a "Please Don't Cut Me" Elmo doll out there right now, right?
And also, there's a Big Bird Twitter feed, Big Bird Fire Twitter feed that already has, I believe, 4,000 followers.
Is there already?
Yes, there is. Are you surprised?
No, I guess this can happen just instantaneously, which is quite remarkable to me. How quickly this stuff moves through the Twitterverse.
This is the atmosphere in which we live right now.
That's right.
So what did you think of Jen Psaki and her batting away some of these questions we asked her about whether she was tempted to throw her shoe at the screen?
Look,
do you imagine that they were in fact frustrated?
I can't believe that there are many Democrats right now who are feeling good about what just happened tonight. This was a candidate who came in, a president who came in sitting on a lead. He looked like somebody that was playing prevent defense rather than trying to actually advance the ball. And that's frustrating, especially when you are cheering for your team, right? You want them to score touchdowns. Republicans saw a lot of touchdowns.
One of the theories I saw floated on Twitter is that that the president doesn't really start playing clutch ball until his back is up against the wall. Do you think that's a possible explanation for his psychology going into this debate?
That could be a very good piece of it. And let's face it, President Obama, very good on the campaign trail, loves to campaign, is good at it. Mitt Romney, not as good on the campaign trail, not as strong of a campaigner. This is the kind of environment that is controlled, that he could study for, and he obviously can do very well by it.
We're going to go back to the spin room now. We've got Bob Beauprez there. Bob, can you hear us?
I can hear you just fine.
Hey, Bob, it's Dan Harris in New York alongside Amy Walters. Your take. Simple question, 2 words. Who won?
Mitt Romney. I thought it was an overwhelming victory for Romney. I wasn't surprised so much by Mitt Romney's performance. I thought he would be concise. I thought he would know the subject matter. I thought he'd be very specific and defend his plan and take the fight to the president. The surprising part to me was the president's performance. I thought he was rambling. I thought he sounded either disorganized or ill-prepared or lacked focus. But, you know, from somebody who's done a few debates, certainly not at that level, but I've done a few before myself, whenever you see somebody filibuster and change topics and ramble as much as the president did, that's not a good sign. And it's surprising coming from an incumbent president and somebody who's supposed to be as skilled at this as Barack Obama. I think the president had a very bad night.
Debate. Do you actually think it will move the needle, given the tough polling numbers we're seeing in a lot of the battleground states, most especially Ohio? Do you think one night, this night, can actually change the dynamic in the race?
Well, I think it certainly can. I'll give you a simple reason, a specific reason. Scott Rasmussen, pollster I have a lot of respect for, he says that 15% of voters, even though they may have a favorite, they say they're perfectly willing to consider voting for the other guy. Going into this, I thought Mitt Romney was the one who had an opportunity to grow his vote, grow his base of support. The president seems to be stuck at somewhere around that 46, 47, 48 number, can't quite get over 50. I think this is an opportunity to create a little bit more momentum. I think there is some momentum on Mitt Romney's side, especially out here in my state in Colorado. I think this performance tonight from Mitt Romney, or a very poor performance from the president, might be enough to convince a whole lot of people that Mitt Romney is not only qualified and capable, but a very good alternative to the 4 years we've been witnessing.
Congressman Beauprez, I know that Colorado, the key demographics, Hispanics, younger voters, and then of course suburban voters in around Denver. But do you think that his performance in this debate is enough to get the president to really make some inroads with Hispanic voters. That seems to be a place where just day after day, he has not made up much ground.
Yeah, I'm under no illusion that he's necessarily going to carry the Hispanic vote in this election, but can he do much better than John McCain did 4 years ago and eat into President Obama's base somewhat? I think absolutely, because the issue is the economy. Hispanics have a higher unemployment rate than the rest of the population, unfortunately, so they're concerned about that issue first and foremost. And I think even more than any of the other issues that were discussed tonight, I thought Mitt Romney demonstrated his understanding, his skill, his plan for getting this economy moving again. I thought he outshined the president dramatically. So yeah, I think this was an opportunity for Romney to gain some Hispanic support. It came up tonight, the youth vote, which you mentioned. We've got not just 1 out of 2 of our college graduates in Colorado, but 3 out of 5 of our college graduates can't find work within a year after graduation. So I think there's an opportunity for the youth vote to move some, at least, to Mitt Romney. I think the challenge for the president is to perform at least as well as he did in the various constituent groups 4 years ago. And I honestly don't see that happening. I think Mitt Romney has a great opportunity in front of him to be our next president. And I think tonight he made a big step forward in that process.
Although you got to wonder whether the Big Bird comment might hurt him with the young voters.
That was, yes, the Big Bird comment getting a little attention here. But ultimately, and I think this is a question that a lot of folks that I talk to are wondering, even Republicans, if he did Romney doing well tonight, can he keep up this momentum? So my question to you specifically is, how worried are you that over the course of the next week or so, before they go into their next debate, this momentum will be buried under attack ads and other campaign back and forth?
Well, that's what the Obama campaign will try to do. They will attack and attack and attack, and there's no surprise in that. They confessed, what was it, more than a year ago, that their only hope in winning this election would be to kill or destroy Mitt Romney. So they're going to continue to try to do that. Look, you've got another debate coming up very shortly with Paul Ryan and Joe Biden. I have great expectation that Paul Ryan is going to do extremely well in that debate, and that'll strengthen this team. Then you come back to a town hall format, and unless the president takes up his game a dramatic step over what he did tonight, I think he will be in trouble there again. And on foreign policy, the last debate, the president's foreign policy seems to be unraveling in front of our very eyes. I don't think that that's a debate that the president can be looking forward to. I think this is actually a window of time that's an advantage for Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, and one of the reasons I remain optimistic about our chances.
Former Congressman, former Republican Congressman Thomas Beaupre, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us tonight from the Spin Room. We'll be having much more from the Spin Room coming up. One quick question about this overarching theme we're hearing tonight about Romney having won. I buy it, but there isn't one moment that crystallizes it. And in the former debates where you can point to a clear winner, there is that moment.
But you know what I would say the moment was? The moment was the side-by-side image. That's all you had to do was just take a picture of that side-by-side image. On almost every question, it was Mitt Romney turning and looking, and President Obama looking down. When you look down, it means, one, you don't want to look that person in the eye, which suggests either that you don't want to answer the question, or you're feeling uncomfortable about it, or two, you're not feeling solid enough in your own answer to look back at them.
Which is reminding me to make good eye contact with you.
It's always about making good eye contact. If I see you looking down, I know what you're thinking about me.
I will not do that. So we do have some people who are joining us who have organized Google Hangouts through the course of the evening. I am too old to really know what a Google Hangout is, but we've got somebody here who's actually genuinely young. You were running the, first of all, introduce yourself if you don't mind.
I'm Tom Callender. I was running the Young Republicans Google Hangout. I'm a
Excellent.
student at Columbia University.
Thanks for coming in, Tom. We really
No
appreciate
problem.
it. So, what was there glee in your hangout as you watched Mitt Romney tonight?
I think that one of the things that a lot of the people in my hangout were satisfied with was the way that Mitt Romney held himself during the debate. You mentioned it before, how they carried themselves in the side-by-side. Mitt Romney was very aggressive, looked very comfortable up there giving his answers, which I think is something that a lot of people haven't seen so far on the campaign trail and have been unhappy with. So there was that. And then obviously there was some of his answers, especially on the economy, which a lot of people in our hangout were very excited with.
So we should explain what a Google Hangout is. It's basically it's a live chat where you've got everybody's on their on the camera on their webcam,
Yep.
and whoever speaks the loudest actually comes up into the most prominent position.
Yes.
And so, did you find there was any lulls in the discussion, or were people pretty active the whole time?
I think the lulls really came when the candidates were speaking, and then sort of when there were breaks in it, or when there was something that came up, an important point that someone thought one of the candidates gave. There was discussion on that, but I think a lot of candidates were engaged. A lot of the visitors to the hangout were engaged for a good part of the debate by the candidates' answers.
In the interest of fair time, we've got Chase Harden, who ran the Democratic Students Hangout tonight. Chase, what was the feeling in your hangout tonight?
Some serious disappointment. We felt that the moderator did a pretty poor job of keeping the candidates not necessarily on topic, but actually engaged and challenging the things they said. He kind of got steamrolled by the candidates, and it was pretty disappointing, actually.
What do you think, is your sense the disappointment was in the moderating itself, or do you think it was in Obama's performance?
I think it was actually in the moderator. I was also on Twitter and Facebook, and the responses that I was seeing, people's reactions were that the candidates weren't really giving us the answers we were looking for, and it's the moderator's job to make sure that that happens. When people are trying to say that this was definitely a win for Romney, I don't buy that. I think it was pretty much a wash, not because they both performed really well, but because both of them were completely unrestrained and spent the entire time spitting out the same facts twisted in one way or another. I think it was a wash. I really do.
All right, Chase, we really appreciate it. It's interesting to get that perspective, both from Chase and Tom. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. Let's get it back to the spin room now, and Olivier Knox is there. Olivier, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right, Olivier, you are sitting there right now listening to all the spin from the campaigns. We got a little spin ourselves from Jen Psaki. So tell us, how do the Democrats that you're talking to in the spin room, how are they trying to make this sound?
Well, they're trying to make it sound like a good night for the president. They're making the argument that Romney sounded testy or aggressive, and that he lacked specific policy proposals. They are highlighting the fact that the president's going to be going out campaigning in some of these swing states. But you know, privately, there's a sense of a missed opportunity here, and obviously they're not telling us that very much in the spin room. But my email inbox right now is overflowing. People who are saying, why didn't the president show up tonight? But in the spin room, where they got here late, it's a small bit of choreography here, but even before the debate was completely wrapped up, Romney's surrogates basically flooded into the hall here. They looked very confident, and it took a little while for the Democrats to show up. Whether that's because they were trying to put together some last-minute talking points or what, I can't say. But they're trying to play this off as both a problem for Romney's likability and a problem for his policy specifics.
A sense of why that may have been, just a guess?
Why they were late to the pitch?
No.
You know,
Why the president himself, if he underperformed, what do you think was going on?
You know, I don't know. That's something we've been trying to ask these guys, and they're not really in a mood to answer. He did seem subdued. It's possible that after watching Romney struggle on the stump and struggle in some of his interviews, they may just have underestimated him. We asked Jim Messina, the campaign manager, whether they plan to change their approach, and the answer was a resolute no. But I imagine there's going to be a little bit of soul searching and maybe a little bit of a strategic review tonight for Team Obama.
Interesting question. Did they underestimate him?
That's right. And I don't know that they underestimated him as much as maybe overestimated their own candidate's skill set. I mean, listen, they put those expectations down, right? But Olivier, thank you for joining us. in Denver.
Thank you.
Stay warm.
Thanks.
I think it dropped like 60 degrees in the course of 3 hours there.
Welcome
to Denver. Yeah, over the course of the debate.
We do have now from our partners over at Yahoo News, Phoebe Connolly, who's been tracking the social aspect of this. This was a pretty big event, it seemed, just judged only on my own Twitter feed, which was quite active tonight.
We do have the official word down from Twitter. This was the most tweeted U.S. political event in Twitter's history. So the tweet volume surpassed the RNC, the DNC, and anything else they've seen before.
What was the thing that was driving the most tweets?
Well, it's funny. This comes back to this sort of meme question. We're still, breaking out the hashtags and looking at that, but certainly the activity that prompted images and reshares was Big Bird.
Big Bird.
Yeah.
So Big Bird really the winner or the loser tonight? It's unclear, right?
So
he's never trended. When has Big Bird ever trended?
That is a great question. I think we need to kick that back to Twitter and have them answer this. So we did get some capits in. This one referencing Kanye's sort of takeover of the stage for Taylor Swift at the 2009 VMAs, but bringing Big Bird and Mitt Romney into it. There was also a lot of commentary about the different sized flag pins. Mitt Romney definitely was sporting a larger sized flag pin than Barack
I'll be honest,
Obama.
I did not notice that.
No, I hadn't noticed that either.
Twitter did, though. That's what they're there for.
Now, there was also a contest to see if there was a GIF moment. Was that,
Yes.
were you able to
I have
find
not
that?
yet heard back what the most shared was, but one that I did see that got a significant number of shares was also Big Bird related. And I'm hoping that they're going to be able to pull this up for you, but if not, I'll make sure that we share it on the Twitter stream. There we go.
It is. Wow. So,
Did you have a sense from monitoring Twitter tonight who was winning based on just the chatter on Twitter?
I think actually just the political experience of watching the debate, and I think part of why we saw so much conversation around Big Bird is it was something that average voters felt very comfortable weighing in on. They felt comfortable having an opinion about Big Bird. They were ready to jump in there and tweet about it, even if they weren't sure how they felt about the heady policy ideas that were being discussed the rest of the time.
This is probably an unanswerable question, but I just wonder to what extent younger people will engage more in the campaign now that their Twitter feeds will be filled with people talking about this debate tonight and Big Bird. It just becomes harder to avoid, harder to tune out when everybody's talking about it in social media.
That's right, and that's the question I think that everybody's looking to see, right? So yes, we have this huge tweet volume, but is that actually going to translate to something at the polls? Are people going to go out? Are they donating more?
that's a
Or
very
is it
good
just
question.
a passing distraction?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going to turn now back to the spin room. We're back to Denver, and we are joined by Senator Kelly Ayotte from the swing state of New Hampshire. We've heard from a lot of folks. Clearly, I assume you have good things to say about Mitt Romney. But I want to talk specifically about what the impact will be in your state. The latest polls out of there show Romney down by something like 10 points. Is this debate performance enough to move the numbers in New Hampshire?
Well, I think so, because so many of the voters in New Hampshire, 40% of them are independents. Many of them are tuning in right now. And I think that these debates, they'll be looking at them very carefully. But the bottom line is that Mitt Romney was a strong, effective leader, showed that he was tonight, and he had a strong command of the facts. And most importantly, a vision for how we're going to get our economy turned around and also how we're going to get our fiscal house in order. Those two issues are very important to New Hampshire voters, and he was the one on stage who had the plan and the vision for America on how things can be different. The president has not presented a plan for how things are going to be different in the next 4 years. In fact, tonight he could not defend his own economic record.
Senator, there's a lot of debate among political pundits and pollsters about whether debates themselves ever impact the final outcome of a race. I know that the people in Romney's camp believe he did well tonight. Do you believe he did well enough to win this election for him?
Well, I think obviously there are going to be two more debates in the presidential realm, and at the end of the day, the debates are important. People tune into that, and New Hampshire voters, they pride themselves on being very informed. We have the first in the nation primary, and obviously we're a swing state, so I know New Hampshire voters will be paying attention. But when they go to the voting booth, they're going to be thinking about the last 4 years, where we've had over $5 trillion added to the debt under this president, 43 straight months of over 8% unemployment nationally. Those issues and the fact that the record of where we are and no clear vision from the president on how it's going to be different, I think that's what's going to decide the election. But tonight's debate, I think, really showed the type of leader that Governor Romney will be and how informed he will be as a president.
Senator Kelly Ayotte from the swing state of New Hampshire, Republican senator, spinning for Mitt Romney tonight. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Let's get on to Washington, D.C. now, and ABC's John Carl, who's been manning the fact-check desk tonight. John, biggest fact abuser tonight? Who was it?
Well, I have to say that I think Romney tried to be a little more careful, and I think he was able to call out President Obama on a bunch of big ones, primarily because they were what the president was saying about Romney's own plans. So, Dan, let's start with what was the big one that dominated the whole first part of the debate. The big question over just what kind of a tax cut Mitt Romney is proposing. Take a listen.
This is where there's a difference because Governor Romney's central economic plan calls for a $5 trillion tax cut. On top of the extension of the Bush tax cuts, that's another $1 trillion, and $2 trillion in additional military spending that the military hasn't asked for. That's $8 trillion. How we pay for that, reduce the deficit, and make the investments that we need to make without dumping those costs on the middle-class Americans, I think, is one of the central questions of this campaign.
Now, there's a lot to unpack here, but the number that the president kept coming back to was $5 trillion, that Mitt Romney is proposing $5 trillion in new tax cuts. Romney said that's not true, and we rate that assertion to be mostly false, mostly fiction. I'm sorry, I don't want to get my label. Mostly fiction. And the reason is because Mitt Romney has been clear for a long time that he is proposing no net tax cuts at all. He has proposed cutting tax rates by 20% across the board, but what he's saying is that he will close loopholes to make up for that so that nobody should expect more money in their paychecks. Now, Mitt Romney has not given us details on exactly what loopholes he would close, but that doesn't mean the president gets to kind of make it up for him and say that this is $5 trillion, that there won't be any loopholes closed, it'll be $5 trillion in tax cuts. There's more to that, but that is a pretty central assertion. Now, I think looking forward, Dan, the big question is, will Mitt Romney come out and give some more details about what loopholes he'd close? Now let's take a look at one from Mitt Romney. This was about the president's health care plan. Centerpiece of that plan, of course, is guaranteeing coverage for people that have pre-existing conditions. This is what Mitt Romney said about his own plan.
But number one, pre-existing conditions are covered under my plan.
Mostly fiction. Mitt Romney does have a health care plan, not the one from Massachusetts, but he's got one he's currently proposing. And it does say that people who currently have health insurance or who have had it for 3 years over the last 3 months, cannot be denied coverage. But Mitt Romney's plan offers no such guarantee for anybody who has not had health insurance for the past 3 months. So that claim is simply not true. Next up, Obama had this to say about his own plans for cutting the deficit.
And so I put forward a specific $4 trillion deficit reduction plan. It's on a website. You can look at all the numbers, what cuts we make and what revenue we raise.
Okay, now we have done that, and it is mostly fiction, sorry to say. The president does not have a plan to cut the deficits moving forward by $4 trillion. The $4 trillion plan he is referring to includes about $1 trillion that Congress has already cut. So he can't take credit for cutting something that's already been cut. And the other, another $1 trillion comes from ending the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, wars that are already scheduled to be over. In fact, Iraq is over. So he's counting those savings as part of his $4 trillion plan. He doesn't quite have a $4 trillion plan to cut the deficit. Of course, neither does Mitt Romney, but that's another story. Finally, one more from Mitt Romney, and this is one we've heard a lot in his advertising and out on the campaign trail and here tonight in the debate.
What I support is no change for current retirees and near retirees to Medicare, and the president supports taking $716 billion out of that program.
Okay, so that assertion that the president supports taking $716 billion out of Medicare, I rate that not quite factual. It is true that under the president's health care law, he did find $716 billion to be cut out of future increases in Medicare. Medicare doesn't actually go down. In fact, the program continues its explosive growth. So there are $716 billion out of future increases. By the way, Paul Ryan has those same cuts and increases in his budget plan. And those are designed not to affect current retirees, beneficiaries. What those are is they squeeze providers, they cut down on fraud, find some efficiencies, but none of the $716 billion is designed to have any effect on actual Medicare beneficiaries. So as you can see, Dan, there was quite a bit on both sides. I do believe that Mitt Romney came into this debate wanting to clear up some of what he saw and what are factual inaccuracies that the president has said about his plan.
And we're glad to have you as the referee, John Carl. Thank you for your reporting from Washington tonight. We'll see you later. Let's turn it over now to Austin Goolsbee, a former economic advisor to President Obama. Thanks for coming in. We appreciate it. Let me just read you something that was emailed out by our White House correspondent, Jake Tapper. Quote, I've covered Obama for 6 years now. I've seen him draw immense crowds of tens of thousands and inspire them. But this is the Obama I saw in Iowa in the summer of 2007 before David Plouffe, kicked his tush and told him to get his head back in the game. Flat, tired, uninspiring.
I thought
Agree or disagree?
stylistically looked tired. I mean, I did definitely think he looked tired, and I thought Romney did a good job for himself, coming out swinging. I thought on the policy side, it was a little more opening up problems potentially for the Romney campaign, or at least shifts in what they have been advocating to what they were saying now. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I did think the president looked kind of tired.
If he looked tired, if he was out of the game tonight, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
If he looked tired, thank you, I appreciate it. If he looked tired, if he was out of the game, if he was checked out, what do you you've worked with him? What do you reckon his psychology might have been?
I heard that there's always the question of do you want the danger of over programming and the danger of under programming the candidate, the briefing books, and it looked like Romney had prepared a whole lot. And he wasn't over-programmed, he wasn't robotic, he was pretty comfortable. I think it showed that the president's been busy with some other things. On this, it just wasn't, he wasn't drilled down on real concise answers, and I think, that showed. I think he's definitely got to get more debate prep in.
But let me ask you this, because some of it was about the way he looked, and he did look tired, but he also seemed unenthusiastic about robustly defending his own record. Did you get that sense?
I thought on some of the cases, like on the discussion of health care,
you thought he effectively argued?
I thought he went into rather deep detail. I mean, somebody had tweeted they felt like they were at a bar without a drink, seeing a debate between their accountant and their lawyer. And this was like a high level of detail. So in that part, I thought he was pretty well defending his record. I thought on some of the other, like with Medicare, I was surprised Romney was leveling the charge of the president's cutting $716 billion.
And do you think the president should have pushed back more?
The president didn't say anything in response to that, partly because it was in a chain of several accusations. It did seem like the president probably wanted to get on the board. Now, wait a second, you're advocating the same cuts as I advocated. That he didn't, I think, did open up that as a opening for Romney.
Austin, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
You
Austin
bet.
Goolsbee, former economic advisor to President Obama. We appreciate your time. Let's get it back to the debate hall, and we're going to go to two guys who've been covering this campaign extraordinarily closely, Jake Tapper and David Muir. Jake Tapper, the White House correspondent, David Muir covering the Romney campaign, also the anchor of World News with David Muir. Jake, let me start with you. You sent out an email where you described the man who you've been covering for 6 years as tonight being flat, tired, uninspiring, not pulling any punches. What do you think was going on tonight?
Well, I think first of all, you see, as Austin pointed out, you see the advantages of preparation. Mitt Romney for weeks has been doing intense debate preparation. There have been days that we've been hearing from David and Emily Friedman, who also covers Romney for us, talking about how few public events Romney has on his schedule because he has been holed up doing debate preparation. And President Obama has simply not been doing that as much. He is not a full-time candidate. He is a full-time president. But also, I think you also heard a president tonight that just didn't have his head in the game. What I said in that email was that I've been covering President Obama now for roughly 6 years. I've seen him inspire crowds of tens of thousands. I remember being here in Denver close to the election 4 years ago, and I think it was about 100,000 people came out to see him. I've seen him at his best, and I've seen him at his worst. I remember following him throughout Iowa in the summer of 2007, and he was listless and flat. He seemed annoyed. He didn't want to be there. And I recall reading later that his campaign manager, David Plouffe, had to knock some sense into him and say, get your head in the game. This is, remember, he was third in the polls among Democrats at the time. That is the Obama I saw this evening. He was smart and knowledgeable, but he just didn't seem to be playing to win. He didn't seem to be making a case. And while over the previous few months, the Obama campaign has been successful at turning this from a referendum on Obama into a choice between Obama and the man they portray as an unacceptable alternative, Mitt Romney, I think tonight you saw two things happen. One, it became a referendum once again on President Obama. And two, that unacceptable alternative you've been seeing in the TV ads about Bain Capital and the like turned out to not live up to the caricature of that guy on the Monopoly board. He wasn't Simon Bar-Sinister. He was an impressive guy. So I think that really hurt President Obama tonight.
Jake, do you think that, and are there Democrats talking to you about the fact that they thought that President Obama should have brought up Bain Capital, should have brought up the 47%, that was a mistake for him to stay off of those topics?
I haven't heard anything that detailed in terms of topics that they wish he had brought up. I've just heard general comments from people close to the president, people who very much want him to win, saying that he seemed tired, his head was not in the game, the performance was flat. You heard Obama campaign people in the spin room conceding stylistic points to Mitt Romney, which is something you seldom hear granted by the opposing team. They're talking about how you could see that he was better prepared and he had better zingers. Well, that's important. Those things in terms of performance are part of the debate. Now, yes, of course, they feel like Mitt Romney doubled down on the policies they think that ultimately will make the difference in this election, and maybe they're right. But in terms of performance and in terms of presenting your case to the American people, and Barack Obama, more than anybody, knows that an impressive performance is part of that. I think it's hard to escape any conclusion other than Mitt Romney won.
Hey, David Muir, what words would you use to describe the reaction in the Romney camp tonight? Would you use words like glee, elation?
Two words: mission accomplished. And you know, I got a text from an advisor with the campaign before the debate was even over, saying he came out here and he accomplished what they wanted him to do tonight. He came out, he appeared to be a competent leader, as Jake mentioned, unlike the caricature in a lot of those attack ads. He also came out here, he put the president on the defensive with regard to his policies, how he's handled the economy over the last 4 years. And he also tried to tackle that hurdle, and this one probably will be debated tomorrow and for days to come, whether or not he was able to connect with average Americans and the problems that they face. You know, you heard him, I mean, within minutes of the debate starting, talking about the woman that he met on the trail a few days ago, another woman that his wife Ann had met within the last couple of days, both of them describing their economic hardships, and the governor on this stage saying he's the one with the plans to address those hardships. The president didn't really have stories to tell like he did 4 years ago as far as people he'd met along the way. He did use that anecdote about his grandmother, which was somewhat effective, but it was Governor Romney tonight who talked about the people, the faces of economic hardship the most, and that was a goal that they had set out to tackle. I have to tell you, the Romney campaign before we came into this, I'm sorry, I can hear Romney in my ear. I thought that was another question for you, but you can see him talking on the stage. But one other point is, going into this, you know, the Romney campaign, as Jake mentioned, practiced so much for these debates, this particular one with their own mock debates. One of the things that I'm sure they're surprised that did not come up tonight was that videotape about the 47%. They were prepared to take that head on. It didn't come up. I think there'll be questions about whether or not that was the president's strategy to come in here and to leave with a tie. And I think there'll be a lot of debate about whether or not that strategy actually worked tonight. Governor Romney's got to be very happy. There was a photo tweeted moments ago by his body man who accompanies him on the trail with the governor and Ann Romney leaving. She says her most important role on this campaign is to be in that audience on debate nights, the 19 debates during the primary. She was right in that front row again tonight. They were leaving, I'm sure, very pleased with his performance here tonight.
David, just one more quick question before we let you go. Tell us about what Mitt Romney does from here on out. He's got a lot of momentum behind him now, but there's another week and a half or so before his next debate. There's a lot of campaigning to do, and of course, a lot of attack ads still on TV. So how does he keep up this momentum, and if you've talked to the folks on the campaign, their sense of how they keep this going?
Listen, going into today, they said if he can get up on that stage tonight and lay out some of his own plan and put the president on the defensive, then he will have won the debate. And that is how they look at this tonight. He's changed the conversation almost immediately. All of those critics within the Republican Party, I saw one tweet, a sigh of relief within the Republican Party and some hope tonight. He has to sustain this conversation now. As we know, there are 3 more debates, 2 of them with these 2 candidates that you saw on the stage here behind me. So he's got to maintain the conversation. You know, Jake and I were talking, there have been big events during this campaign so far that haven't done anything with the numbers, and it is a close race. It'll remains to be seen whether or not this can move the numbers anymore beyond the tightening that we have already seen in the last couple of days, Amy.
All right, David Muir, Jake Tapper, thank you guys so much. Very insightful, as always.
We appreciate
on the trail.
Our men on the trail. It's a tough life out on the trail. I've done it. It is not easy, so we really appreciate what they're doing. As we mentioned before, we've been organizing over the course of the night these Google Hangouts where people basically meet up in a digital room. You can see what it looks like right there. You get a bunch of people on their webcams. Whoever talks the loudest gets the most prominent spot. One of the groups we put together tonight was mommy bloggers, and we have a representative from that group here tonight, Ms. Bourne. They were telling me in my ear what your name was, but I missed your first name. Can you just Cassie Bourne.
Yes.
And you are from Babel, which is
Right.
a parenting blog, a part of the Disney family, if I understand correctly. So what was the sense of the room?
So we had a collection of both Republicans and Democrats, and the biggest conversation that they had is really wanting to get down to the issues and getting some answers for, how their plans were going to play out. They feel like there's a lot of attacking candidates back and forth, especially in social media, on the blogs and on Facebook and Twitter, and no one's really getting down to the nitty gritty, and they think it's about time that we talk through some of that.
But tonight's debate was pretty wonky.
I mean, there's a lot of nitty gritty in there.
They didn't feel like they got it?
They feel like they got some of it. I think the biggest concern that we talked about was the U.S. deficit, and they don't have faith. Even the Republicans didn't have faith that Romney's plan they didn't have a lot of faith in it, and then they just also felt that they're really concerned about taxing middle class and taxing small businesses, and so they didn't really feel like anyone had the answer they were looking for.
Just one more question about the moms there. Did they feel like the issues that relate to their day-to-day lives were addressed, whether that's education, family issues, their own job situation, their own economic situation? Did that feel like it was actually brought up in this debate?
The biggest concern that people had in that one was around health care. And one mom shared a story when she was pregnant with her second child. She was 36 weeks along, and her husband lost his job, and the struggle to find health care. And the interesting thing is the conversation went beyond just what the government provides and the cost of healthcare, but even how we approach healthcare in this country. We talked a lot about Michelle Obama and kind of getting kids up and moving, and how we approach just going to the doctor regularly, and rather than waiting to be sick, going on a regular basis, and how that could help in kind of the education and healthcare. But it seemed that the healthcare and the deficit were the 2 hottest topics there.
Thanks a lot for organizing the
doing
hangout. We appreciate it. For coming on and talking to us tonight, we appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you.
As we mentioned before, we organized a deeply unscientific Twitter ballot where we asked people who was winning over the course of the debate. We've got the results back up on the screen. We can't emphasize strongly enough this was not for scientific use, but it is interesting nonetheless. Now we've got updated numbers. Romney still winning 2,044 to 1,624. In line with what we're hearing from the Chatterati, the pundit class, including my co-host tonight.
Yeah, the
Amy
chatterati.
Walter,
Is that what I am? I'm the chatterati.
You're much more than that to
Thank
me,
you.
let me just say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was really,
You're welcome.
That was really sweet of you.
You
But we
moved.
do have I moved deeply. And we have another man joining us now who is also part of the Chatterati class.
He's
and
a charter
apparently,
member of the Chatterati,
I did not
this guy.
get the memo about everybody's supposed to wear purple.
I know.
This is supposed to show swing states.
It's the
It's
moment.
all
You don't
about
want to take
right.
sides.
Okay,
So who won?
Romney won, and I don't think it was close at all. I mean, I think this is so eerily familiar, having worked for President Bush and that thing. Watching the debate in Miami against Kerry, we had a lead. Kerry came in. He came in to win. Bush came in for a draw. The same exact thing happened tonight. Romney came in, walked into this thing. He wanted to win, and it looked like the president came in. I'll just play for a draw, and it showed.
Okay, but Matt, we know this was recent history. This wasn't like 100 years ago. So how does the president and the president's team not fall into that same trap? Well, I mean, how does that happen that they do fall in the same trap, I guess is the other way to say it.
Well, things in life we learn is people seem to repeat history all the time. And presidents, especially because of the bubble in, they're protected. Somebody tells them every day, oh, wow, you got a great tie on. You look great today, Mr. President. I think there's going to be some frank conversations tonight and tomorrow with the president saying that you're going to have to, like this next debate, if you have another performance like this, then you might start to hand the keys over to the White House to somebody else because he can't afford. This race was close. It's now gotten closer. My guess is it's going to be tied by this weekend because of this debate, and he's going to be in for it if he doesn't turn this around in the next debate.
So there's a real potential that in hindsight we could look back at tonight as a turning point, as the turning point in this race if Romney goes on to win.
Well, I think what tonight did is all the gains that President Obama and his campaign had accomplished over the last month are gone. Those are all wiped out. The race that they sort of had gotten this to a 5-point race and all that, that's almost probably been wiped out. Maybe he keeps a 1-point lead, but I think now we're faced with 30 or 31 days of an almost dead even race. It may be 2 points, maybe 1 point, but that's what this debate did. It caused us to go back to where we thought it was early in the summer.
It's keeping it interesting.
Absolutely.
Matt Dowd, thank you very much. It's been a long day for you, and we appreciate it. But let me ask you a question, Amy. Even if this does, as Matt says, bring it back to a much, much tighter race, the battleground state, Matt, is so difficult for Mitt Romney in Ohio, a state that a lot of people say he has to win. He's down by 7 to 10 points, depending on which poll you believe. Does tonight change that?
Well, that's what we're going to have to figure out is, it's one thing to say I took undecided voters and pushed them away from my opponent and on to me. It's another thing to say, not only did I push undecided voters, but I have to take people who were in the camp of my opponent and bring them onto my side. Those are two very different things that Mitt Romney has to accomplish. That is what we'll have to see in places where he is above 50%, like Ohio, like Wisconsin.
Right. That's a big ask. That's a big job to expect him to do from one debate. We'll see if he's able to do that. One last member of the Chatterati we want to bring in here. I'm hoping we can get this term into the lexicon in a bigger way.
Hashtag right now.
Work with me.
From Yahoo News, Walter Shapiro, do you agree with pretty much everybody else we've had on who's not being paid by the Obama campaign that President Obama lost this debate?
Absolutely. This was a physics problem. We've always wondered what would happen when a low-energy moderator collides with a low-energy president.
I never learned that in my physics class.
It's Newton's fourth law.
So earlier today, we had you on talking about Ohio and the fact that everybody you talked to in that state really feeling very dour about Romney's chances there. Was this performance enough to move those numbers in that state?
My first thought is, yes, I'm going to make some phone calls tomorrow morning. That said, Obama still has a lot of things going for him in Ohio. And I kept spending the whole time thinking about if Romney had not made the 47% comment, if Romney had had a better convention, if Romney was winning the ad wars, this debate could be devastating. As a result, I really want to see polling that comes out after 2 or 3 days, because frankly, I'm puzzled. It was a bad night for Obama. There's no way to spin it. I'm sure Valerie Jarrett or some people in the White House are saying, great job, Mr. President, but only they could be saying it. Because the truth is, this was one of the worst performances I've ever seen an incumbent president have in a debate. What I don't know is how it plays.
Wow, that is, and I don't mean to make this as an age comment because you are a very youthful-looking man, Walter. But that's saying
I don't like where this is going.
That includes the Calvin Coolidge debate.
That's what I was going to say. But so you're saying compare it to where George Bush was in the 2004 debate, when that's what everybody's looking at right now and saying, boy, that was a guy who was ahead and really got steamrolled in his own debates. You think it was worse than that?
I think it was pretty bad. What I kept thinking about, and I talked about him earlier today, was Walter Mondale. Because the whole rap against him when he ran in '84 and didn't run in '76 was, did he have fire in the belly? There was no evidence I saw tonight that Barack Obama wants a second term. And it is that sort of sense, combined with a few things like saying, I agree with Mitt Romney on Social Security. You could just see the operatives just throwing up their hands in Florida.
Right, saying that goes into an ad.
Yeah. And but basically, this is recoverable from, I suspect, for Obama, because all the swing state numbers were so much in his direction up until 8:59 tonight. But still, even the Bush looking at his watch in '92, it is really hard to ever think of a situation where presidents were off, they were annoyed, they were off kilter, but never have I seen a president this low energy.
Wow.
Not pulling your punches. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
So great to have our partners from Yahoo News on throughout this live stream. Thank you again, sir. Appreciate that.
Right, and to have that, to have that perspective, because it is true that, I know it is hard. You're going through a very long slog of a campaign. You're president of the United States. You also have these things like wars and very difficult things to deal with every day. But wanting a second term, I think that's going to be the real issue that we're going to hear about over and over again. You have to be able to bring that fire in the belly.
Do you think there's a question about whether he actually wants the
Of course not. Of course not. It's really showing people that you want it. So that's
right,
going to be
and that's going to be. I'm sure somebody's going to get in his ear and say, "This is your job from here on in."
Right.
More fire in the belly. As we said, we organized these Google Hangouts throughout the course of the night, where people get in a room and chat via webcam about what they're watching. One of the groups. This one surprised me that we were doing this, but I think it was a very good idea. We organized was comedians. We have the moderator of this hangout, a guy who I was eating pizza next to during the course of the debate.
It's good, right?
Well, it was very good.
I love cold pizza in a debate.
It wasn't that cold. So what was the sense of the room that you were moderating tonight? Who won?
It was funny because you kept talking about low energy on Obama. Debates really sap the energy of comedians. We love to sit around and goof and everything like that, but we started watching, and we're in the virtual hangout and everything, and then it starts off, we're just kind of making jokes. Oh, look at Jim Larry, he looks like one of the Muppets. Oh, look at Romney, robot. And then we start watching, and we're getting into it. Now we're not talking, and now it's four comedians staring at a screen. Oh boy, we're boring people. What happened? We're not funny.
Is it because the debate was uninteresting, or was too interesting?
It was too interesting. I mean, I felt like an obligation. There were people hanging out because, on Google it's just the four people hanging out, but then there's people who can watch. They're not participating in the hangout.
And you were not entertaining those
I was trying to, I kept thinking, I'm not entertaining these people, but there's policy here. I'm an American. I need to know what's going on with my country. So I felt, I felt pulled in two directions.
Amy and I were discussing earlier that there are comedians all over the country scouring tonight's event, looking for material.
Yeah.
Based on what you saw, was there anything in there that has the makings of a good joke? I imagine you're going to say Big Bird.
Big Bird was all over. I was checking Twitter while we were watching it. People love that. But the thing is, on Twitter, a lot of the lefties, you see the left wing and the right wing hashtag. So I was looking at them both. Being in show business, I have a lot of left-wing friends, and then I have a lot of right-wing friends who are kind of in the closet, because they're in show business. They don't want to come out, So I see both sides online. And a lot of the left-wingers, they came out of the gate, they were all excited, and then as the debate went on, they were starting, their tweets were few and far between. They were running out of steam, and they were looking for things to make fun of. So when Big Bird came in, they were like, Big Bird, Big Bird! They were so excited to have something to talk about besides the fact that the president was letting them down, which they didn't want to admit on Twitter.
Thank you very much, not only for organizing the Hangout, and not only for coming on here and talking about it, but also for sharing pizza with me earlier in the night. We really appreciate it.
Good pizza.
Have a good night. We want to thank all of you for joining us during this live stream. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a very
watching
much
alongside
pleasure.
you, and we have 4 more to go.
Yes, we have 3 more to go.
Vice presidential
begun.
debate next week. Week after that, the town hall style meeting debate. The week after that, foreign policy debate. We'll be covering all of them here on abcnews.com and our partners. We thank you for joining us once again, and we're going to leave you with some of the best moments of the night.
20 years ago, I became the luckiest man on earth because Michelle Obama agreed to marry me.
Congratulations to you, Mr. President, on your anniversary. I'm sure this was the most romantic place you could imagine. Here with me.
There will be 6 roughly 15-minute segments with 2-minute answers.
Romney's proposal calls for a $5 trillion tax cut.
What is the difference? Let's just stay on taxes.
But I got right.
Yeah, just
virtually everything he just said about my tax plan is inaccurate.
All right.
So if the tax plan he described were a tax plan I was asked to support, I'd say absolutely not.
We're way over our first 15 minutes.
It's fun, isn't it?
It's okay. It's great.
I will eliminate all programs by this test if they don't pass it. Is the program so critical it's worth borrowing money from China to pay for it? I'm sorry, Jim. I'm going to stop the subsidy to PBS. I'm going to stop other things. I like PBS. I love Big Bird. I actually like you, too.
Now let's move to health care. Governor Romney, you want the Affordable Care Act repealed. Why?
I sure do. It has killed jobs.
The fact of the matter is, we use the same advisors, and they say it's the same plan. When Obamacare is fully implemented, we're going to be in a position to show that costs are going down.
We need to have leadership in Washington that will actually bring people together and get the job done, and could not care less if it's a Republican or a Democrat. I've done it before. I'll do it again.
Part of leadership and governing is both saying what it is that you are for, but also being willing to say no to some things. And I've got to tell you, Governor Romney, when it comes to his own party during the course of this campaign, has not displayed that willingness to say no to some of the more extreme parts of his party.
This is an important election, and I'm concerned about America. I'm concerned about the direction America has been taking over the last 4 years. I know this is bigger than an election about the two of us as individuals. It's bigger than our respective parties. It's an election about the course of America. What kind of America do you want to have for yourself and for your children?
4 years ago, I said that I'm not a perfect man and I wouldn't be a perfect president. And that's probably a promise that Governor Romney thinks I've kept. But I also promised that I'd fight every single day on behalf of the American people, the middle class, and all those who are striving to get in the middle class. I've kept that promise, and if you'll vote for me, then I promise I'll fight just as hard in the second term.